Friends, welcome to Central United Methodist Church. For those of you that don't know me, I'm Rob Blackburn, the senior pastor here at Central Church. We're glad you're with us this morning. The great thing about Central Church, it's a lot bigger than this big, beautiful building. It represents the people who worship here every week, who serve in many ways in this community, and those of you that are joining us in your homes this morning. By belonging to Christ, we belong to one another. I hope that you will sense that belonging as we worship today. Peace and grace to you all.
morning. It is so good to see you this morning. Welcome to Central United Methodist Church. We are a community of Christ in the center of the city, and we are delighted that you're here to join us in worship this morning. It's going to be a wonderful day of worship with some really incredible music. So worship will be a really special time for us this morning, and I'm glad that you're here to enjoy it and be part of it. We have a number of things that are happening always in the life of our church, so many things that you will want to be aware of. Some of them are listed in your bulletin, and I'll call your attention to that. It's somewhere in the middle of your bulletin. It's fairly large today. First off, there's a youth progressive dinner this evening. It starts at 5. They're going to meet in the youth arena at 5 o'clock and then go from there. And you can see information about that is in the bulletin there. Meditation on Advent, yoga and meditation for the season, happens this Wednesday, December 6th. It begins at 6 o'clock. Our friend Kelly McClellan, who does yoga for us on a regular basis, is coming to do something very special for Advent. So we invite you to come and be part of that. Register now for Kids Day In. That's happening next Saturday, December 9th, but the registration deadline is December 6th. So if you have children that would be interested in doing that, please sign them up. You can send me an email or you can call me here at the church. There's a blood drive next Sunday. If you can participate in that, please contact Maureen Carr. There is a trip being planned for Lumberton. If folks can go, Dave Ballard is in charge of that, and you can see the dates and the information that is associated with that. If you can be part of that trip, please contact Dave Ballard. You'll also see that there are forms here for the poinsettias and the peace lights. The information is in there. You can fill that out and turn it in at the office, or you can turn it in the offering plate later in the service. Please write 2 separate checks for those if you're planning to do them. If you are new to Central, or if you are visiting with us this morning, we invite you to join us after the worship service this morning in the Welcome Center and Library. It's over in this direction, just over this way, the first door on the right, and we invite you to come by so we can get to know you a little bit better, and we are so glad that you're with us this morning. Rob has a few words that he'd like to share with you about stewardship.
We had wonderful leadership earlier in the fall from Jeff Joyce and the stewardship committee leading us through the campaign. In the middle of that, we were celebrating our 180 years, and part of the legacy of Central Church has been a legacy of generosity. Some of the things that you heard Lynette talk about that are possible through this church are because of your great giving. We had a good initial response, and now we're at that time of year where those that were not here or had not had a chance to respond, we ask you to prayerfully consider your pledge and help us move into the new year together. This is another day that the Lord has made. It's a very moment that God has made. So let us rejoice and be glad in it as we worship our God.
Our soul awaits for the Lord. He is our help and our shield. Our heart is glad in him because we trust in his holy name. Let your steadfast love, O Lord, be upon us, even as we hope in you.
Something's coming.
We're waiting. We're eager.
It's more than presents.
It's more than lives.
We open the book of hope and read the promise.
God will be with us.
Our hearts are glad. We trust God's holy name.
God's unfailing love surrounds us.
Today, we light the candle of hope.
special music this morning. We invite our first and second graders to stay in worship this morning and enjoy that music with your families. Kindergartners and preschoolers, if you would like to go downstairs, you can meet me at the store right here and we'll go downstairs for worship.
Our scripture lesson this morning comes from the second letter to the Corinthians, chapter 9, verses 11 through 15. Hear these words. You will be enriched in every way for your great generosity, which will produce thanksgiving to God through us. For the rendering of this ministry not only supplies the needs of the saints, but also overflows with many thanksgivings to God. Through the testing of this ministry, you glorify God by your obedience to the confession of the gospel of Christ, and by the generosity of your sharing with them and with all others, while they long for you and pray for you because of the surpassing grace of God that He has given you. Thanks be to God for this indescribable gift. This is the word of God for the people of God. Thanks be to God.
You just heard Luke reading from the letter of 2 Corinthians. A lot of scholars believe there are actually 4 different letters to the people of Corinth. In the opening letter, Paul, just takes the people of Corinth out to the verbal woodshed for their acrimonious, divisive behavior. But now in this particular letter, you can hear a conciliatory Paul. He's applauding the people of Corinth for their generosity, for opening their hearts and their pockets to the needs of others. But then he goes on, he says, you know, don't you, that what you're doing is really just responding to the sheer extravagance of God. And he says, never stop saying thank you for the inexpressible gift in Jesus. He said, this goes beyond the language of all praise. Giving and receiving. That really takes us into the theme of this season. Do you ever, this time of year, think about some gifts that have been well received, or maybe not quite as well received as others? Every year at Christmas, my Aunt Irene gave me 3 blue socks. I could always count on it. There's nothing wrong with that. I could wear out a pair of socks in a month given my level of activity, but my parents were more imaginative in their gift giving. They weren't bound by the annual supply of sensible gifts like socks and sweaters and such. They tried to match the gift with kind of the wild hopes and dreams and fantasies of a little boy. And sometimes there was this holy trinity of giving, the right present, the right person, from the right persons. And so at Christmas time, I never made out one of those little wish lists. I just sat back and waited for the glad surprise, gifts. But I think we experience that gifts are not ends as much as they are means that describe and define our relationships. Sometimes for me, gift giving has helped me to say things I've always wanted to say but hadn't got around to saying. They give us permission to say, I care about you, I'm devoted to you, and I want you to know it. You open a wonderful present, a broad smile on your face, and you say, you shouldn't have done it. And they reply, well, it's nothing. But in that moment, it is everything. It is everything. I think a lot of us here this morning, we would say we believe the greatest gift of all, of course, is the gift of love. And that's where we're going here in this season, into the depths of that truth. That's what Paul is saying. Say, this gift, it's ineffable. It's inexpressible. There are so many things about Christ's birth. It's so many things to be said. It's miracle, it's mystery, it's mercy, it's an ensign of hope. All that and much more. It's the love of God for the people of God. If typical flesh and blood stuff had anything to do with this birth, Mary and Joseph would have made other arrangements, would have made other plans. If reason had anything to do with it, well, it wouldn't have all worked because this doesn't make sense. We have an unwed mother and father, vagrant migrants out of district, disrupting shepherds from their sleep and confusing angels in their watch. Okay. Don't try to make sense out of this. This isn't our show. This is God's show. This is God's initiative, ushering in a new kind of love. I think Benjamin Britten, who wrote the Ceremony of Carols you're going to hear this morning, would agree with Paul. He's on his way back to England, 1942. They're having to zigzag the course to evade the German U-boats. And in those 3 weeks, he writes this that you're going to hear this morning. And what you're going to hear in the melody and the rhythms is the extravagance of his gratitude. Thanks be to God for this gift. Our theme through Advent is going to be why Jesus? Why, after all these years, is there such celebration surrounding his birth? I'm going to begin this week by agreeing with Paul. Why Jesus? Because this is gift. This isn't something we could imagine, manufacture, or devise if left to our own devices. This season of the year, it always stretches the limits of my linguistic abilities. Jesus, the sign, symbol, the substance of God's giving. Jesus, no matter how long you know him, some of you have known him for a long time, yet you never know him as well as he appears to know you. Jesus, the one who remains ungraspable, unmanageable, yet oddly close, relentlessly relational. I tell you, in this time of year, this is when I find myself drawing my breath with care to try to speak a word about these things. So much of it is not what I figure out, what figures me out. So much of it is beyond my grasp. But I have grasped this much through the years. This morning I can say this quite clearly. Jesus is the inexpressible gift because in his radical teachings and his poured out death, in his life beyond death ending, he showed us, he taught us the meaning, the purpose of our lives. Thanks be to God for this inexpressible gift. And if it's a gift, what's our role this morning? And what's the primary takeaway from what I'm sharing and what Paul shared? I think it would say our primary role is going to be that of receiving. Oh, you mean, wait a minute, did I mean that? Was that a slip of the tongue? Did I misspeak? Did I mean to say giving rather than receiving? Look, giving and receiving, they complement each other. Without one, the other suffers. How many times have you heard me or some preacher say it's more blessed to what? To give than receive. I'm going to suggest this morning, maybe so, but it's harder to receive. Case in point. How do you respond to a compliment? Is that an easy thing for you to deal with, a compliment? You know, compliment is one of those things that kind of ambushes you. It comes at you and you didn't really expect it and you can't really repay it. When a compliment comes your way, what do? Well, we might blush, we change the subject, we try to shrug it off, or you just simply have to sit there, take it and say thank you. That's how God's great gift of love comes from the Godward side. Okay. Unexpected. Can't repay it. Look, this isn't something we initiate so we can get God to respond in a favorable way to us. This isn't something we ratchet up through our religious activities. This is something we can only get, okay? We can only get and receive. It comes as gift. Last week we talked about the posture of expectancy. This morning, it's the posture of receptivity. You say, oh, that's easy. No, don't say that. Don't think this is going to be some easy, automatic thing. Not for us adult types, okay? It's hard for us adults, particularly, to be at the mercy of a gift. I want you to think about that. It's hard for us as adults to be at the mercy of a gift. It takes courage. It takes courage for us to believe that as a human being on this planet, that I need something, I need someone to give me grace and truth that I cannot provide for myself. That takes courage. Or maybe a little childlikeness, not childishness, childlikeness. I have to be careful here in church never to over-romanticize my children. Some of you have little ones. You know there can be nothing more petulant and self-serving little 2-year-old in the crib trying to get the world to revolve around him. But here's something else about a childlike spirit. A child is one who can receive the most extravagant of gifts, not because he or she thinks they deserve it, but they can receive it simply because it has their name on it. And it's been given to them. I was reminded of that. And you know, I went on this kind of Wesleyan heritage tour, and I come back, and there's a little pressure on being a grandfather, right? You got to bring some bounty home, right? I know they were looking for that. I have 8 grandchildren. That's a lot of work over there thinking about all that, and I'm not sure my imagination matched that of my parents. I didn't just try to buy sensible gifts, but, well, I got something for all 8 of them, and they were all coming over on a Friday evening and had all the gifts. A table about the size of the altar table here, and I covered it with a sheet because, you see, I knew they were coming in at a different time, and I had to wait. So here they walk into the room, and here's this table, and it's covered with the sheet. And then when just the right moment was there and they were all in the room, voila, you know, I removed the shroud. I removed the shroud. And there the gift table is. I don't know if all of them hit the targets. I know at least 2 of the gifts did. There was 3-year-old Liza Jean, and now she's got this plastic Queen Elizabeth crown on her head, and she's waving this scepter, and she has Gaga. I didn't make that up. That's what they call me. She says, Gaga, how did you know I've never had a scepter? Okay. And then there was 8-year-old Henry. Gaga, how did you know I love detective stories? As he puts on his Sherlock Holmes hat. And then he had this little plastic pipe, and he said, I don't know if Mom would want me to have a pipe, but thank you anyway. Yeah. I don't know if the rest of the gifts were quite as well targeted. They were all well received. When the shroud came up, they didn't sit back and say, oh, Gaga, you shouldn't have. No. Every one of them came eagerly to the table. And they saw what had been given to them. They reached out, said thank you. Okay. Now, friends, this is Advent. We're preparing our hearts for the God who once again is going to come down the back stairs of heaven with the gift of love in God's arms. It's for you. It's for me. Oh, there's only one catch. Listen, there's one catch. This is like all other gifts, even the gift of grace and truth. It can be yours only if with the child of a heart, a child's heart, you reach out and you receive it. There's nothing you have to do. There's nothing you have to do. Only receive it. Paul would probably add to that, after receiving the gift on your way home, say thank you, thank you, thank you.
Welcome, may the I sing of the maiden that is motherless, King of all kings, to her son she turns. He came also spirits that his mother was lost to him, and spirit not from the on the cross. He came also spirits to his mother's breast. And people Written in the book.
Now let us go forth knowing that the love of God and the grace of Jesus, the fellowship of this church and the Spirit will remain with us always. So let us go in peace.
This concludes the early morning worship service at Central United Methodist Church located at 27 Church Street in downtown Asheville, North Carolina. Thank you for joining us. We invite you to worship in person with us. A contemporary worship service is held Saturday evenings at 6 p.m. Traditional services are held Sunday mornings at 8:45 and 10:55. For more information, visit our website at centralumc.org or call the church office at 253-3316.